Okay, I'm recording. So one of the what we're here to do is we want to talk about, I think in general, I think we want to talk about organizing the podcast. And you're going to talk a little bit about mind mapping, right? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about something I'm just starting to do, which is build a table of time and topic so that I can find stuff as I'm editing and putting pieces together, trying to figure out a way to keep that organized. So can you go ahead and take charge of the screen? And then
I'm going to first of all do this. And what I want to do is to give an idea of how I think about mind mapping. And then I'm going to go to examples to speak to your point or your question around scheduling. Okay. So first of all, with mind mapping, my simplified view of the world is that there are two paths. Some folk are about doing art and having wonderful, crazy designs and handwritten forms and color. And that's not my approach to it. I would be pretty bad at that. But secondly, I find it as an amazing productivity tool. So that's where I bring a set of things together, which is I use Mind Manager mostly. I use microphone, but also use speech to text. So I use Dragon a lot as part of my toolkit, and I use Evernote. So that's sort of the grab bag of what I use on most times. I'll go through a few screens, which are screenshots of mind maps, to give an idea about ideation and how I use it. And so you can see mind maps laid out in a format like this, which is you start with a central topic, then you come out with branches, and then you build out from there. So that's kind of a traditional way of using a mind mapping tool. Another way of thinking about it is to use it in a brainstorming sense, where you capture a whole lot of words. And the words that I'm using here don't matter so much for what we're discussing in this moment, but you can put a whole range of stuff, and then you can start to, went back, should go forward, and then you can start to bring that forward into different shapes, and you can then start to attach words to central topics. So you don't always have to start from the center and work out. You can start from a scatter of thoughts and then start to assemble. And that's how I use it a lot. And then you can start to build connections between. And the same diagram could look like that, or it could have a little bit more detail and look like that. And then you can start to look at this, back to this ideation and this brainstorming. What are all the things I want to actually have, because I know all of these different points matter. And then through mind mapping, you can start to bring it into different flows. You can create order out of, I don't want to call it chaos, but initially unconnected, or you're not sure of the connection or sure of the flow. And these are the sorts of ideas I think about when I think about using mind mapping in a podcasting or building out our podcasting schedule approach. Other ways to use it, to get used traditionally, you can build out organizational charts and also different swim lanes. And then you can start to build out time schedules. And Danny, I'll come back to that in a moment as we'll build out a really tiny, simple example as to the extremity of where I think mind mapping can help me, maybe help you and others, in running and scheduling and developing our mind mapping, our podcast show and schedule. Because then you can go and punch it out into a Gantt chart. And I always figure that if it's in a Gantt chart, it's probably a plan. And if we're about building out plans, it's probably a good way to go. And this is all from the single tool. So that's the start. I'll just pause before I swing to something else. Questions or thoughts or considerations so far?
So the account planning could either be project management for podcasting week to week, month to month, whatever cycle you're doing it, or it could be the flow of a single podcast.
It could be. It absolutely could be. You're right on the money there. Let's come back. Let's come to that almost immediately. What I'm going to do now is to expand this out. And the first thing is I'm going to show the first level. And with this, we start to look at title of the webinar, video, speaker, short description. And you can start to see how from that point, you start to build out the subpoints. It actually gets a little bit better, and I'll just do a really quick example now. If under the short description of the webinar content, I wanted to then go into the detail, I come up to the menu bar here where it says notes, and I can start to write whatever I want as the notes over here. And if you wanted to think about it in the terms of if the central topic was the title of a book, and then we had a subject for a chapter, and then we had sections, and then we're into the body. So you can start to see how you get this cascading build, which you can then, by the press of one button, produce a single Word document. So that's a simple example, I think, of how the productivity can work when you start to think about not just the tool as capturing thoughts, but the way you start to automate or to simplify production of content. Going okay so far?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, it's like in project management, you can get, a software with all the bells and whistles.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what it does, but it also has a long learning curve. And it sort of depends, where you're starting and what you're trying to do with it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that most of our colleagues in the fellowship will probably start simpler. I know I will.
I'm with you. And that's why, even though it probably didn't come up on the screen before, something like Simple Mind is a product that is a great product. And it would allow somebody to very quickly get underway at a low price point if that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think I'm probably doing it right now, and I'm sharing the screen from Simple Mind.
Yeah.
It's just a different tool.
Yeah.
And it's a great example you use to draw between project management tools, some very fundamental. In fact, you could do project management using Excel if you wanted to, all the way through to the most sophisticated. And this is more than rudimentary, Simple Mind, and there are a range of others as well. But I'll go back to Mind Manager and start to build out a schedule for ourselves. So I'll start a new mind map. And if you and I were sitting down to build out our podcast schedule, so we'll just put this here. And what we're going to do then is think about a few guests maybe. So we'll have Bob, Bob with an I. I feel compelled to change that. Joan, Ted, and let's get Danny in there too.
Okay.
So we've got those four folk. And then we're going to attach them to the schedule, and we're just going to even that out. So that's what we've got. They're the first four guests that we're going to try and approach. The next thing we might want to think about is, well, what's Bob's area of expertise, and what is it we might like to discuss with him? And it could be work and sport and a whole range of other topics. So now we're just starting to build out our thinking. And then it could be, what would be some of the key questions we might want to ask about work? And it could be start, first job, hardest day. Oh, I wrote over one, doesn't matter. But we start to actually build out our thinking a little bit. And then underneath the hardest day, we might want to open up that notes here. And we might start to think about an article we read. And it might be about reference article from Forbes. And what we can do then is we can actually put in the hyperlink and all of that good stuff. And what we have then is we're starting to build out that skeleton for our schedule. What it can also be is, by publishing, we could also have something that is templatized, that is in fact the invitation. So for every time that we do this,
I see.
The template. And in that we have over here the words and intro, who I am, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And there'll be a lot of standard stuff, but there'll be a little bit that will change. And it could be about work and sport for Bob, whereas Joan, it's about work and family, or whatever the topics might be. And in a single place, we're now building out a template that's a framework that's also a single place to go to where we have this connectivity. I'll just do one other thing, Danny, and then I'll stop for a little bit of a conversation around this. We've got Bob, and I'm just going to move this here. We start to put the task info in, if that's showing up on the screen. So for Bob, we're going to look for Bob between the 27th and the 30th of November. And we're just going to put that down now. And we know that Tony's going to be the resource on that.
Yeah. And
all of a sudden over here, we've got that information. And then we start to put that type of information for Joan, for Ted, for Danny. And then we can start to look into the tools a little bit deeper here, and you'll see there's different bits and pieces. We can actually push that out to a Gantt chart. And as we saw previously, we can start to see the information in a way that makes sense to us from scheduling and from the work that we're needing to do and how we go and do our time management. So we'll stop. That's probably enough for us to get a little bit of a chat underway. Have I hit some of the key points you thought?
Yeah, I think that, like the way I'm sort of picturing this is, I'm a musician. I play baritone saxophone.
Yeah.
And I like to improvise. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I know about improvising is you have to have the fundamentals. And I'm saying this because, with the podcast, you want it to flow and to be flexible and to be able to take advantage of, what you're hearing and go with what you're hearing. But it's important to have the fundamentals down, meaning who are you talking to? What kind of research do you want to do? What did you learn from that research? What kind of questions does that make you think you might want to ask? So that when you start, you've got something laid out in a sort of simplified form that has that information, so you can look at that one piece of paper while you're, or not, just probably, I don't know, for me, if I for me to learn something, I got to taste it. And once I've tasted it, well, then I know it, and I'm more flexible and responsive and spontaneous. And so this is that tool.
Yeah.
Now, I would still have to say what you're showing me now is more complicated than I want to learn.
Yep. In which way? Expand on that a little for me.
Well, I feel like I would, like right now, I'm learning all this technology about podcasting.
Yeah.
And I have a background in blogging. So, I have some of the, fundamentals of, time management, subject, homework. But so for me to take on learning a complex software, it would just be more energy than I have right now while I'm still such a newbie, in the technology of Audacity.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you, and I understand. To me, if I was prioritizing it, I'd be prioritizing exactly the same way you are. If I had the choice of trying to get on top of the stuff that matters to producing the audio, and I'm doing the audio first. what I know is that once you get into it, it's a really powerful tool, but
Yeah.
I'd be absolutely prioritizing the way that you're thinking about it.
But I still think, like, what I think is valuable is you're have more expertise in this and more familiarity. But what I'm learning is that this kind of organizing your thinking and your doing in a graphic way will help make production easier.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah. I wonder if I've got
to be efficient. I think, we're all busy, people have their, their families and their day jobs and their, whoever they take care of and, their exercise and whatever. And so there's a limit. Anyway.
Could I just show another screen, Danny? Has this
sure.
switched across now? Has it got Udemy prospecting writing sheet? Okay. I produced, and it's nothing fancy, but I produced a course and I published it on Udemy. In doing it, I actually used Mind Manager to help me organize and to produce my production schedule and to keep on track of where I was up to. So I had these different sections, and this is exactly what I used. And then course pitch, I had two, and I used, actually I'll close this down. And I wrote the text, and that was a pitch for the opening video. And then the section one, there's an introduction that explained the flow of the course. And under that, there's a whole range of text behind that. The second one is around segmentation. There's the banner point around segmentation, the introduction, there's the text.
Yeah.
And then I produced the video. The reason I thought I'd show that is it kind of speaks to, I think it's probably the best way I could illustrate how I think about this as a tool for what we're doing. Because out of it, if I just go to another, I then start to use it for a range of things. I answered one of the questions that was in one of the workshop steps using it. So I threw the questions in and it allowed me just to lay out the answers. And then it allows me to start a big banner. It also starts me to edit, review, and draw connections between. Jane offered the opportunity to provide feedback on something of hers. Now she took her text and put it into a mind map and chunked it down and started to look at it differently than I did when I looked at it in just a block of text, and then started to draw some associations, which to me weren't immediately apparent. Now, I know and work with a whole range of people that do understand your blocks of text and pages of text 1,000 times better than me. I'm lousy at it. But when I do that and I do it that way, it works for me. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, but the whole idea of actually building out, as with the course, that's a way of getting complexity. And then it's about distilling it down to just the half a dozen or the 10 questions that are going to guide me through the conversation in the podcast. So start small, get large, then I bring it back to small.
I like that. So, okay, so let's see. Can I take the screen back for a minute and then give it back to you?
I go stop share.
Okay.
It's probably back to you.
Okay, it's back to me. So now I want to share, and I want to share this. Okay, so here's what I did. You can see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so what I was thinking is you were looking at sort of macro organization on the one hand, meaning the either a course or many podcasts, and then you showed a micro of one course or one podcast.
Yeah.
And so how is it that now that, so that's sort of like the setup to the podcast. Okay, so now it's, you have the raw material.
Yeah.
And now it seems like the place to get productive is or efficient is in the compiling of the final product.
Mm-hmm.
And so how then and so this is, just the quick and dirty tool, that I put together just for right now is, today as I'm trying to piece together a final product. So how does this then, can we marry the two? So I stopped sharing.
Just make sure I understand what's on the screen. Is this your notes having done the interview? So at 2 minutes and 29, you actually start setting the stage, or that's your schedule?
No. What it is I have 3 different sources of sound.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have me talking. I have Bob interviewing Mike.
Mm-hmm.
I have me interviewing Bob.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to put together, or this other one that I'm working on, which is I've interviewed 3 people. And am I going to do, one, then the other, or am I going to try to, find the themes and merge them?
Yeah.
And so how am I going to build it?
Yeah.
So for this one, the one I'm working on today, is, so I'm going to just do a general, I have 2 different versions of my introduction, and I really have 3, and I'm not sure which I'm going to use. Then I'm introducing the episode. Then I'm telling some stories about Mike. Hang on, let me just turn this off. Then I'm going to tell some stories about Mike. Then I'm going to set up the interview with Bob. I'm going to have a clip of party sounds, or it could be music, whatever, so I'm sort of building the 30 minutes, and sort of right now, this is where these are, so I can go find them. And I've sort of taken the approach that I'm not going to micro refine, micro edit. Right now, I'm macro editing.
Yep.
So, is my making sense?
It is. A couple of things I'd say. Actually, if I could take the sharing
Yeah,
t-shirt
sure.
back to me. I interviewed Chris Motz.
Okay.
And in fact, and he is the CEO of a company called Hindenburg. And Hindenburg Journalist is a software that I use for my podcast production.
Mm-hmm.
And he was good enough to speak with me, and that was just a couple of days ago.
Okay.
This is exactly what I had on the screen when I spoke with him.
Okay.
100%.
So this was your prep.
This was my prep.
Okay.
No, my prep was more than this, but this is what I had in front of me.
I see. This is the output
live
of all that. Yeah.
This is the output. So I start small. Chris is the guy. He's agreed to the time, and I went large and I brought it back in. So I had all of these different prompts in front of me, and the way it ended up going, and it was set up that the first question was the only question that I knew I was going to ask. That was going to be my entree to the discussion. Mm-hmm. So from there, I ended up with this one here as to asking him about the banner photo, which is an amazing photo on the website. That was actually the last question. And when I got to that, I closed it after that. And even though if you were to say, oh, that's the sequence, I never put it down as the sequence, but I had them as prompts. So if he said something, and if I was in a moment of mild panic about where do I go now, it's like, oh yeah, I might ask him to do that. And I knew because of my research. So for example, this one over here, how do you describe your audience? I actually know 3 supplementaries to that. So if it turned out that's where we went to, because of the research that isn't showing here, I was good to go for another few minutes.
That's great. I like that. I mean, so today, I interviewed Bob about interviewing Mike, and I only, had I thought about it in the middle of the night. I sent him a text. He responded, I can talk to you in 40 minutes. And I had, two questions. And I asked him. I mean, he would have answered more. He's very verbose. But one was, what was it like for you to do this, the interview, and the other, what about, when your wife died? And but when I did the three fellas, that I interviewed from the panel, I had done some homework and I had 4 or 5 questions, on open notes. Each one had a page. But I like this. I like this. But now take this to it's time now. You're done now. You're done with the interview. And now you've got to produce the file.
Yep. Do you want to have a look at that?
Yeah.
This is the interview. And I've already started editing it.
Now, see, you put those labels in. I haven't done that yet.
No, I didn't. That comes automatically.
Oh.
With,
What
so
software
if we want to just do the 1 second tour. Yeah, if I want to do the 1 second tour, actually I won't bore you with it, doesn't matter. But net, that's the 20-minute interview right there. And that's some of this at the front is a little bit of backwards and forwards. And then I asked him a question. He gave a long answer. I asked another question or made an observation, whatever I did. His answer, me, him, me,
okay.
him, me, him, me,
but
him.
Okay,
Done.
Are you pretty much like the first interview I did? I'm just producing it, the way it went.
Yep.
I'm not moving anything around. Now, Mike, the thing about Mike is totally different. There's a lot of movement. And I don't know yet about the caregiver group. But so I don't know enough to ask a question.
Can I have a crack at one?
Yeah.
I don't intend, if I go past 30 minutes with anybody, I haven't achieved the outcome that I'm looking for. And the outcome I'm looking for are a few very specific questions that I think are interesting because it's about appealing to me first.
Okay.
And if that's the case, then I'm going to get this every time. And if I get this every time, and there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 moving parts, nothing much is going to change. Because if there's one thing that I've learned in this short period of time is to be proud of the output of this. It takes a certain amount of time. And if it's twice this amount of time, it's going to be more than twice the amount. And I'll do it for about 3 weeks and then I won't do it ever again for the rest of my life. And that's not what I want to happen.
I can totally relate to that. That's just such a riot. That's right.
It's the truth. And in it, let's look at it this way, Danny. If I set up and I think I've got maybe 8 questions, and like with this one we're looking at, there's under 5 questions.
Yeah.
Even I can't screw that up.
Well, no, and for me in blogging, I've been blogging weekly for 6 years.
Yeah.
I only missed one week, and that was the week my mom died. And but I can do that because I have a production and I have a limit on how much time I edit. And the only time I ever go back is one of my routines with my blog is that I'll put at the end of it, I'll put like 3 related posts.
Yep.
And if I put 3 related posts there and I see, oh, I didn't have a thumbnail or, oh boy, that was stupid. I might do a little bit of editing. But otherwise, hey, it's as good as it's going to get. And, the only way to do it is just to keep cranking.
Yeah. And it's about the story, as they say in the classics.
I have a coach for my website and social media, so I didn't hire somebody to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I hired somebody to teach me and help me do it. And that's her wrap. Her wrap is it's 80% content and then it's form. And she said, we can have the most beautiful thing in the world, and if the content is shit, it's shit.
Yeah.
So you can see that in advertising.
Yeah.
So
anyway. One other learning I've had in being tight. I've had 4 interviews so far.
Yeah.
And I have another one tomorrow night.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Wow.
And but where I was getting to is I'm in Sydney and I'm yet to interview anybody in Australia. They've been
really?
India, the UK, and the US.
Interesting.
Which isn't in my day. And for example, last night I did one at 8 p.m. and one at 9 p.m. Now, if I'm doing something that's more than 30 minutes, I'm not going to do 2 last night for starters.
Right.
And in fact, I mightn't have even done 1 because I was trying to get that to start around 6:30, 7 o'clock for me.
Right.
That's a consideration that isn't governing me, but it's associated there somewhere.
Yeah. All right, man. This is great.
That's kind of all I got. Have I missed anything that you're hoping I might have spoken to?
No. This is good. It's just food for thought. I got to digest. Yeah. This was a
Thanks for the chat, mate.
Yeah. Have a good day.
Yeah, I'll do my best. You too. Speak soon.
All right. Bye.
Okay. All right.